What's up everybody, this is Post-Production Pi, Editor-in-Chief for SLRLounge.com. In this video, we're going to be going over the new changes as well as giving you a basic introduction and primer to the SLR Lounge Lightroom preset system version 5.1. We are working on tons of great tutorials and resources and mixology recipes as always, but we want to get this preset system out there and we want you all to hit the ground running. And so we have this primer video that's really going to get you started. It's going to show you the overall framework, and after watching this short little video, you're going to be masters of the preset system and creating awesome masterpieces on your own, which you can upload to SLR Lounge and show us your great mixologies and your great images in the forums. Now, this preset system is compatible with not only Lightroom 5, it's also compatible with Lightroom 4. So if you're still on Lightroom 4, don't worry. It's the same developed settings, it's the same developed process, and so it's going to work with backwards compatibility, at least to Lightroom 4, just fine. We are currently working inside of Lightroom 5, and before we jump right in, there is one question I want to address, and that's what's the difference between the preset system and why are there so many presets when compared to a preset pack? Well, when you download a preset pack, like let's say a vintage pack or something like that, it would have 10 or 20 different presets in there, and all of them are designed to get you to specific effects. And if you want to modify them, well, you're working basically over here on the right side, and it's only basically designed to do one type of effect, and all the other stuff that you want to do with it, you're modifying manually. Not only is this cumbersome, it also makes it so you have to have tons of different presets, and a lot of times these presets have crazy names and so forth, and it becomes very difficult to basically figure out how to process an image and how to customize, and you end up wasting a lot of time. With the preset system, what we've done is we've created a developing framework where basically within 1 to 4 clicks, you can get to any style you want. It doesn't matter if it's a softer portrait looking image. It doesn't matter if you want to create a vintage high contrast image or a completely washed out and bright image or an HDR image or a landscape and nice poppy detail. Everything can be done with the preset system and in just a few clicks. So from a workflow standpoint, using the preset system is incredibly quick because in 2, 3, maybe 4 clicks, we can basically have all of our settings dialed in without having to go through and dialing in these settings manually, which is going to take minutes. In addition, we can try out several different looks with an image in just a matter of seconds. Like literally you can click from one preset to the next, make small modifications to try out different looks and to customize that preset however you like. Next, the preset system makes developing incredibly simple. You follow the because framework, so you choose a base preset, you modify your curve if you want to, you can make additional adjustments if you want to, and add additional special effects if you want to, but that is basically it. So not only is it speeding up the overall developing workflow and process, we're also given an unlimited variety of creative options right at our fingertips just by clicking one additional preset. This makes testing out those different effects incredibly simple, and from a community standpoint, we have thousands of different users that are using the presets, and sharing these mixology recipes becomes incredibly simple because instead of sharing an entire, say, develop setting or a tutorial, all you have to do is say, click this base, click this curve, and make an adjustment, and you're done. All right, so I've talked enough. Let's get started. We have this first image right here. This is of Yoko. We're out in Laguna Beach. And if you all remember, we actually shot this image on an iPhone. That's right. I'm hitting I to bring up my information. This was shot on an iPhone 4, not even a 4S. It was a 4. All right, so the point is I want to bring up this picture to show you that we've optimized this system to work with any camera, any type of file, whether you're RAW, JPEG, whether you're shooting Nikon, Canon, it doesn't matter. The presets are going to work incredibly well, and we've tested a whole host of different cameras and different file types to make sure that it works that way. All right, so let's get started from the top with My Mixology. Now, if you are a previous preset system user, then you'll remember that we actually had a lot of different My Mixology folders in the previous version. We've done away with those. We kind of decided that with our framework, the My Mixology was really intended to be your own custom mixology that you've designed with the preset system. And we wanted each user that might use a machine to have their own custom presets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here and I'm going to change this to Pi. Now, if you have multiple users on your machine, then you guys can create multiple mixology folders, each with their own presets. If you want to, you could create different folders based on your workflow. So you could have a folder based on your professional images, you could have a folder based on your personal images, or one based on fashion, one based on landscape. However you want it to go, that My Mixology folder is basically yours to customize. When you update the preset system, it's not going to change your mixologies. So we have a preset here that says custom mixology goes here. You guys can either right click, rename it, and make it your own preset, or you can just delete it. So I'm just going to leave it there for now, but that's just to remind you that this is where your custom mixology goes. Now, for those that did use the previous legacy preset system, all of the previous mixology we included in this mixology folder under legacy. That way we don't have anybody asking, oh, I really like these old effects that we did, because these are great mixology effects. They're all stylized. They all have app descriptions. So just go through and click them and you'll see exactly what they do. But we didn't want anybody basically missing those and kind of wondering why we didn't include them. So we still have them. They're great one-click stylized presets that are in the legacy mixology folder. Now, moving on, let's talk about the new framework for developing. It's the Because framework, so we start with basically a base preset, we move on, we modify the curve if we want to, we make adjustments if we want to, and we add special effects if we want to. So with the base presets, these are completely new to version 5.1. And what these are is basically one-click presets that get your image to a finished standpoint. These are based on different popular professional effects, and they do a great job of just finishing the image. But they're designed to be in a format where it makes it incredibly simple to make small modifications or change the colors or add special effects in a very simple manner. We have 4 of these folders, and starting from the top we have soft stylized afterwards. So basically the soft folder, it used to be called soft portrait. We changed it to just soft because, well, soft portrait meant that it kind of implied that it could only be used with portraits, but it's not true. You can use this on any type of image that you want to have a softer look. And soft, by the way, does not mean not sharp. Soft simply means that we don't have as vivid colors, we don't have as much mid-tone detail. It's much more flattering for, say, portraiture, for newborn photography, for wedding photography, for these types of shots that have people in them, or just, say, portrait shots. Okay, so we call this the soft preset category, and the base is all the standard looks, so high contrast looks, HDR looks, and so forth. Next we have soft stylized, and the soft stylized is going to be basically stylized versions of the soft presets. So we're going to have different types of fades. Bright fades that are bright images and have a nice fade to them, neutral ones that have a little bit more powerful fade, high contrast fades, darker fades, and so forth. Beyond that, we have the vivid category, and again, this used to be called vivid landscape. Now we're calling it vivid because, once again, we didn't want you to feel like you can only use it with landscapes. You can apply these to portrait images if you want that vivid look. But in general, these vivid presets are going to have higher contrast, more detail in kind of the mid-tone, more saturation, and so forth. And again, we have the vivid stylized, which are going to be vintage versions of those vivid presets. So let's take a moment and show you exactly how this is working. So I have here a portrait image of our lovely model. I'm going to go to my soft category, and starting from the top we have soft import reset and soft import plus profile reset. Now when you're importing, we previously had another folder for import presets, but there were only 4 presets in there, so we thought it was just more simple to put them where they belong. So when you're importing, if you're importing, say, portraits, then use the soft import preset when you're bringing it in so that it applies it to every single image. Now when we click this, we're going to see that it kind of overall, it gives us a little bit a more punch. We get all our sharpening effects. We have our highlights and kind of our whites pulled back a little bit. We have more flattering kind of skin tones and so forth with this image. Now the soft import plus profile is going to do the same thing, except it will apply profile adjustments to the lens. We separated these out because a lot of people basically have preferences whether they want to import with or without that profile correction. For us in our studio, we do not import with profile corrections because it can change the way that the image looked in the camera. So I'd recommend, if you're importing portraits, keep it off. It really isn't going to do much, but if you really must have your profile corrections, you can always keep it on. Both of these presets are reset presets, and that kind of rhymed. I like that. So a reset preset is going to take everything back to the original import version of that image, and it's going to reset everything out. If it doesn't say reset next to it, it will not. Okay, so with the soft, with any of these beyond that, it's not going to change, like, say, our white balance and our exposure. That way, when you flip through these different presets, it'll change everything else other than white balance and exposure, and you can get a quick idea of these different looks. So let's go and take a look at these. We have soft skin desaturated. Now skin desaturated is basically a color profile that's going to pull out some of the reds in the skin, and automatically we notice that we have much better skin tones in this image. So previously it was a little bit too vibrant, where this is much better. We can go to extra soft and kind of get a little bit softer of a look. This is great for more close-up portraits or for portraits that we want to have a softer overall look to it. And then we have super soft, and this is great for extreme close-ups, like shots just of the face or, say, newborn portraits. It looks great on this photo, but sometimes you might feel like it doesn't have enough detail. Going forward, that is on an image that's kind of wide like this. we typically wouldn't go beyond extra soft. So this is actually an image that I would probably choose extra soft. But then we also have things like light crush, and all these again are designed for portraiture use. We can go to the HDR and we have different versions. So if you have an image that has a lot of tonal range, you want to bring it out and it has people in it, then we'd use a soft portrait HDR version because it's designed for use with people. So each one of these has skin desaturation to make sure that it doesn't basically oversaturate skin. We have more pleasing skin tones. So I'm going to leave this on extra soft skin desat, and it's not going to really matter in a second because I'm going to show you some of the soft stylized portrait presets as well, or just the soft stylized presets now. So we have different types of fades. So this is a bright fade. Again, it has skin desaturation. This one has filmic color to it. So if we want to get a filmic look, I would start with this filmic color and then I can modify color as I want, just with a different curve or with a different special effects color scheme. We also have black and white with a standard black and white, and we also have a filmic black and white with a little bit of vignetting, a little bit extra contrast, a little more grain and so forth. We have different types of fades. Some are high contrast, some are low contrast. So this is kind of a medium fade. We have a punchy fade that has a little bit of more of a matte feel to it with still a lot of contrast. And we have one of my favorites, which is the dark fades. And we'll explain how to use these, but the dark fades are beautiful for basically creating these kind of overall slightly darker matted looking images. And I'm just raising up the exposure a bit. They create this matte look to the image that really looks like an editorial shot, like a shot taken out of a magazine. So I love the dark fades, and they work incredibly well, especially with fashion, with editorial type photographs and so forth. All right, with each of these, we have a filmic and a black and white and a filmic black and white version. So you guys can create or start with a base preset that's close to where you want it to go. And we'll show you that customization in just a moment. But for now, that's good enough for soft stylized. Let's go on. We're going to select a different image. I'm going to select this little landscape image right here, and let's start with the vivids. So again, the format is designed to be very similar. So we have vivid import plus profile. Both of these are reset presets. I like saying that. All right, so this vivid import is going to import, it's going to add extra punch to it, it's going to sharpen, it's going to finish up the image without adding profile correction. Whereas this import plus profile correction will add the additional lens profile correction and so forth. Now, again, these are both reset presets. So if we select any of these, like light crush, and we change temperature and we change exposure, if I click on a reset preset, it will take it all the way back to the original with the import preset adjustments applied. When I adjust exposure and temperature otherwise, like I'm going to adjust exposure right now and temperature to be cooler, any of the other presets are only going to modify basically the settings. They're not going to modify temperature and exposure. Those are things that stay constant so that you can test out different looks very quickly on your image. So let's reset this out real quick and just flip through a couple of these. So we have light crush, which is going to add a lot of extra blacks to it, make for really great silhouettes or for high contrast images. We have an even step further, which is a heavy crush. Again, pulling everything down, adding additional blacks to the image. We have HDR, and this isn't necessarily an image I would use for HDR, but if you have an image that you want to expand the dynamic range, we have that. We also have grunge HDR presets and heavy grunge HDR presets. Each one of these, you'll notice, is a little bit different. We have color versions and black and white versions. So there's not skin desaturation on these because these are intended for uses on images that you want to have a more vivid look. Okay, so if we want that, we'd have to apply it later on. Going forward, we have vivid stylized. Again, these are the same kind of format where we have stylized filmic looks to these effects, but they're based on the vivid presets as opposed to soft presets. So they're great for creating these filmic looks to images and really, you know, modifying colors, creating black and white versions. I love, like, punchy fade would work incredibly well in this image, like especially the black and white creates that nice matted black and white look. And we're testing all these out in just a number of clicks, and they're all very descriptive and easy to understand. Okay, so that's our base, that's our foundation here, is we have these base presets that basically we want to select to get us close or get us to where we want. Now, once we've selected our base preset, we're going to move on to our curves. So let's talk about the curves now. Now, just like before in the legacy version of the Lightroom preset system, curves are organized by color schema. So a neutral curve is basically going to keep the original color tones, but it's going to make little tweaks to overall saturation. So here we have things like saturate versus skin desaturation, which pulls out some of the reds, versus light desaturation versus cross-processed saturation, okay? And we have that in different levels. So the way that the curves are organized is the first word of each curve tells you whether it's going to brighten or darken the overall image. Okay, so we have bright, neutral, that's not going to have any effect. So bright's going to brighten, neutral's not going to affect the overall brightness of the image. And we have dark, and this is going to darken. Vintage punch, well, it's basically a neutral vintage punch, but we didn't call it neutral because they would have gotten too long. So vintage punches, again, don't modify the exposure. Next word talks about the contrast. So here with a bright wash, we're washing out the image. Here we're adding a punch to the image. So this is basically high contrast. This is our standard look. Here we're adding a punch, but it's a vintage punch. So that means we have a little bit of fade, we have a little bit of matting in the blacks and in the highlights, but then we have a high contrast image. Whereas a dark wash is going to darken and wash the image out. The next word describes basically the coloring. So here we have saturation, skin desat, light desat, desaturated cross processing, and so forth. So it's very simple to understand. You go to the cool curves, and these are all basically the same curves, but these are designed to have a different color applied to them. So a bright wash will brighten the image, it'll wash it out, and it's going to apply teal as the color. Azure is going to apply blues, and you can see how beautiful that tinting is as we add it to this image. If I say that I want more kind of not so brightened of an image, I can flip it to a neutral wash with the same color toning. Or if I want just a vintage look, but I still want it to have some pop to it, I can flip it to a vintage punch with that same Azure color toning. Again, the curves are a great way to quickly modify contrast as well as the toning for your images. So once again, we have warm curves. This follows the same format. And we have antique black and white curves. This is all of your black and white effects, okay? So we have amber, black and white, and we have a little bit of yellow in the toning. We have bronze, which adds a little bit more of the browns into it. And we have azure, which is adding more blues. So if I flip back to the regular, you'll see that there's a little bit of blue in that toning. Again, it follows the same format as far as overall what it's doing to the exposure, then to the contrast, and then to the color. So each of the curves work exactly the same way. We would choose a curve after we've selected our base preset. Now let's move on to our adjustments. And to do this, I'm going to select a different image first. So let's go and actually select, I'm going to choose this image right here. So with our adjustments, we have basic adjustments from exposure to more advanced adjustments that are doing several things at a time. Some people ask, why do you have exposure in here? Well, because when I'm making adjustments to my presets, I don't really want to go over to the right side until I'm basically just ready to fine tune anything. And so if I'm just wanting to test different exposure levels, it's very easy to move up and down with the exposure tool, and I don't have to move the mouse from left to right. So that's why we've included that over here. Next, we have our base tones, and these are great for basically different types of effects. So these are doing several different things. We have a levels boost, which is going to basically add additional contrast to the image by boosting levels. We have an HDR boost that's going to boost dynamic range in the image, which we don't really want for this image. But what I do want for this image is some portrait flattening. And this is going to basically flatten out the highlight tones for portrait images. So we can keep clicking up until we see the right amount. And right around heavy is where I would say this looks good. So here's zeroed, and we have heavy highlights and heavy contrast, and here's that flattened look where we can see just how we're pulling down these strong highlights over the skin, making it much more even over skin tones. So that's the base tones. We also have detail and skin. So we can basically, if we're working on portraits, we can soften the detail overall, when we can go all the way up to, say, heavy boost to create more of a grunge look. And this would really be more on street photography than on models. So for this type of shot, typically I would leave around -10, -20. Next, we have contrast. Again, this works the exact same way as exposure. We have a max fade over here, and you can click through and just increase contrast. Again, it's one of those presets that we wanted to include just so that you have control of it over here on the left side, as opposed to having to go to the right side and make adjustments there. With shadows and blacks, we have different shadow black levels. And again, these are commonly tested levels across different types of images, types of photography, and so forth. So if we want to darken our blacks just a little bit, we can go to a light, we can go to a medium, and get the right amount of darks right in there. It's going to make all the adjustments for shadows and blacks simultaneously. Next, we have saturation. For an image like this, I want a little bit of skin desaturation. We have a bunch of different saturation effects. Skin desaturation is going to reduce skin saturation. I can warm up the image a tiny bit and not have to worry about those crazy gnarly reds in the skin. We also have a D-red plus a blue boost, which is going to pull down a little bit of our blues just for portraits where we want to have a little bit more vivid skies. So again, these are common saturation effects that we're typically using not only in portraiture, but in landscape photography, in journalistic photography, and so forth. The D-red is also adding a little bit of adjustments to the HSL to pull that out, and so forth. So we're making quite a few adjustments with these types of adjustment sliders. Next, we have our noise reduction, and this is based on two different types. We have skin noise reduction, which is like for a portrait shot where we want to just smooth out the pores a little bit on skin. We have light, medium, and heavy. Generally, I'm leaving it more on light. We also have noise reduction based on film settings. Okay, so if you're shooting 400 ISO, it's not going to basically flatten out the image too much. It's really optimized for these settings across Nikon, Canon, Sony cameras, and so forth. All right, lastly, we have vignetting. We've dropped in our post-crop vignetting actually into the same category. It used to be in special effects. We included it in this category because we figure whenever you're just in vignetting, you want to have it all together. So we have different vignetting settings that, again, create different optimal vignetting options based on different types of photography. Natural is going to be zeroed. We have reverse light, which is actually the standard amount that we apply to most of our images just to kind of get that even tone gradation when we're not using something like profile correct. We also have post-crop vignetting, and this will give you more of artistic vignetting effects for those that do like to use that. Okay, so that's it for the adjustments. So after we've dialed in a base, a curve, we make whatever adjustments necessary. Oh, sorry, I forgot one. Let me flip over to a different image. I'm going to show you the last one. Now this, we've kept in our adjustment tool for the dust correction, because if I click Q to bring up my spot removal tool, and then I'm going to hit T, or actually my toolbar is already pulled up. I almost said tooled up. But if it's not pulled up, hit T to pull up the toolbar, and you have this visualize spots option. This is new to Lightroom 5. So if you're a Lightroom 5 user, you can use this, but I'd recommend that you still use the dust correction curve. If you're a Lightroom 4 user, then you don't even have this option. You want to use the dust correction curve anyway. But for Lightroom 5 users, we demonstrated that our dust correction curve is still more powerful than the visualize spots function, because when we click on visualize spots, we not only have to click on it, but then we have to adjust the slider up and down to be able to see all of our spots. Now, I can't really see everything there, so I can at this point. But what happens is when I zoom in to start correcting these dust spots, you'll notice that dust in these areas becomes incredibly difficult to see. And so it's really tough to kind of scan through here and identify those dust particles. So what I like to do is instead just use the dust correction curve. And I would do this at the beginning of working on an image. And the dust correction curve works perfectly in Lightroom 4 and Lightroom 5, and you can see how much better of a visual representation it is when removing dust. We don't have to do any sliders either. All we're going to do is just zoom in, and we're going to correct our dust just by simply clicking and removing each piece. Okay, so obviously you guys know how to remove dust. We're not going to get into that. But when you're done, you can just zoom back out and turn off the curve, and we're back to our normal image, but with our dust correction applied. So again, for Lightroom 5 users, I would still use the dust correction curve over the visualize spots. It's more effective, it's more efficient, and there's no really need to basically worry about a slider or anything like that. All right, so that's it for the adjustment tools that we have, our different adjustment settings. Now let's move on to color schemes. And I'm going to go and pick a different image to do this. So let's select this image right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a soft stylized look. And I want this image to maybe have a more filmic but bright color look. So I'm going to select this bright fade, and it has a nice little film that it's a grain that it's kind of applying with a little bit of vignetting and so forth to get that look. So that's one click and we're done. And it's great. This is finished if that's, you know, the color and everything that we want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just adjust my tint a little bit and my temperature just to get it kind of corrected or where it should be for the natural image. So this is looking pretty good right there. It's actually really close to where I wanted it to be. But we're going to go into the SFX now, and you can test out the different color schemes. Now we've completely remodified the color schemes. These are based on all complementary, analogous, and tone-on-tone colors that you would typically find in film. Okay, so if we select yellow-violet, it's going to apply yellows in the highlights and a little bit of violet in the shadows. We take yellow-blue, and again, we get orange in the highlights, blues in the shadows, orange-teal, we get orange in the highlights, teal in the shadows, and you can automatically start to see the different types of film effects that we can create just by selecting this. We want Fujifilm, we'll select something that has greens, like for example we can do a yellow green or a green red, and we get this beautiful kind of Fujifilmic look with those greens and so forth. You want Kodak rich oranges, we'll select something with oranges and reds in it. Okay, so and we can do that just by selecting any of these really. But we can modify these tones, and we have complementary, which are basically opposite on the color wheel. We have analogous, these are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. And then we have tone on tone. So tone on tone is going to give you more just simple color toning, and you might use this for whenever you want kind of an overall color just to apply to an image without any kind of mix. You just would basically want that single tone. All right, the great thing about these is that these also apply over black and white. So let's say we have a black and white. Let's choose the same type of look for our image. Let's just switch this curve to a black and white curve. So we can use the color effects to also apply to our black and white. And we can modify our toning and kind of get this split tone look well, it is split toning. We kind of get this, I meant to say duotone, or like, where you're basically adding colors in a black and white look by doing these different split tone effects. So again, color schemes are completely independent of curves. So we have two ways of modifying colors in our images. We can modify the color curve, or we can modify the color scheme, which is great because now we can add different versions of these colors to get even more complex looks. So I'm going to reset this out just by hitting reset color, and it's going to take us, this is the black and white version. So let's go back up. We can actually hit V right now. It'll take us back to color. You can also go back up and select the appropriate, color curve as well. I'm just going to hit V to get us back. Next, we have film and lens effects. These are basically where we're going to get our film grain, so we can click, get different levels of grain. Again, these are optimized for different types of grain that we've seen. We kind of compared, and digitally, they do a great job of mimicking film. We also have edge softening effects. Okay, so this gives us that little tilt shift effect, and you can see it pulling in from the edges. These are edge tilt shift effects, and so basically if we want to control over a specific area, we would do that with the brushes, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. One thing to note with lens edge softening is that it's applying a graduated filter, okay? So with Lightroom 5 and with Lightroom 4, there's a bug in there that doesn't allow you to basically reset this graduated filter by using a preset. It allows you to apply it by using a preset, but not to remove it. So if we want to remove that, we just need to click reset on the graduate filter. This is the only one that works that way. It's just a bug in Lightroom that they haven't yet changed. Okay, so this is great. Now let's go through a couple different image examples and just show you how powerful this system is. I'm going to start over here with our little buddy right here. And the vision that I kind of have for this image is just like a nice dark filmic look, and I might want to have some kind of unique colors applied to it. But what I'm thinking is something that has a nice amount of detail to it, but it just has a dark film look. So what we're going to do is hop into Vivid Stylized, and again, this is why we don't call it landscape, because we're applying it to an image that's not a landscape, but it's going to work great. So I'm going to apply this dark fade vivid look with the color filmic look, and I'm actually happy with just the way it looks right now. I can go to my exposure, I can adjust from here, I can go over to the right side as well. It's really up to you guys and your workflow preferences. But let's say we're going to go up to maybe around 0.5 for now. I'm going to keep it a little bit on the darker side just so it has a little more old school vibe to it. And then I can go in and I can modify saturation. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a little bit of skin de-red. And that's going to pull the reds out of his skin and just kind of desaturate a little bit on the image. And then I'm going to go and apply a little bit more of a color scheme. I want to get some greens in here, maybe some oranges. So let's try this teal orange or possibly orange teal. And these give me this great, beautiful look. And I can do a little bit more modification with just a little temperature adjustment and a little exposure adjustment. And again, we've gotten to a great filmic look with some nice greens in our shadows and kind of vibrant oranges in our skin tones and so forth. We want to change something, we can just flip to a different color effect, and we can get tons of different looks and colors just by clicking. Again, this is the power of the presets, is that you can try out tons of different things very quickly. Imagine how much time it would take to modify a tone curve. But we can modify the tone curve if I say that I want a more high contrast look to this image. Well, I'm just going to go back to, say, my curves. I'm going to go to my neutral curves, and I want high contrast, but I still want a matte look, still a vintage look. So I'm just going to choose the vintage punch with the skin desaturator. And now we get a highly poppy version with still some matted look to the overall blacks and shadows and highlights. I'm going to bring down my exposure a tiny bit, and now we have this high contrast version of the same image. So you can see how easy it is to create these different looks. Now let's say I want to go up and I want to do just a black and white version. Well, I can just go to Vivid, and I'm just going to choose a black and white filmic, and then again I'm going to adjust my exposure and so forth. Okay, you can see the difference between the vivid filmic black and white versus the soft black and white right here. So this is a soft dark fade black and white. It's just going to have a much softer tone. Again, this is designed for an image that we want it to have a softer look to it. With this image here, I want to have that kind of grungy journalistic look. So I want that high contrast look to the image. And so that's why I would use it. All right, so let's go on to another one. Let's go and select this image, and I'm going to hit Control-Shift-R just to reset everything out. It's Command-Shift-R on a Mac. Let's go to our soft presets, and let's just say I want to just have a standard-looking image here, just nice, high color, good contrast. So I'm going to go Extra Soft Skin Desaturator. And that's it. I have a nice standard color version of this image. But if I want, I can make additional modifications. So let's say I want to just change the curve. And on this curve, I want to actually, let's say I want to cool it down a little bit, and I want it to have a little bit of a wash to it. So I'm going to choose a teal neutral wash. We get that wash effect. If I don't like the color, well, I can modify temperature. I can always change my my preset over here to a different curve and just see which one I like. Now with this image, I'm going to go with a cool cross because it has like a nice cross look to the image, but with some kind of a cool tone background. And all I'm going to do is warm it up a tiny bit. And so with 2 clicks, we selected our base and just our cool cross neutral wash. We got to this look, I adjusted my exposure, and that was it. All right, let's move on. Let's go to, I'm going to select this image right here. This is a perfect example of an image that I would use like a crush on. So this is a wedding image. It's a nice shot of this son of mom here that's dancing for their mother-son dance. I can't talk right now. All right, so this is a shot on a 5D Mark III. Again, all of these images are shot in different cameras. We have a Mark II, we have a Mark III, we have an iPhone, we have a GH3 over here with a Porsche shot, we have Nikon, we have everything in here. So it's gonna work just fine regardless of the camera used. Now for this one, what I'm gonna do is go up into my soft, and all I want to do is just either use a light crush or a heavy crush. So these light crushes are designed to add contrast to our image, and it's perfect for shots like this where we have a flare coming through and kind of washed out contrast. I'm going to go up to a heavy crush and see if I like that better. And I do. I actually really dig it. It has a nice overall look to it. All I got to do now is just warm it up. Okay, so for weddings, all we did was 1 click. We selected our heavy crush. Well, we tested, so we tested with an extra click. But 1 click, we're done with that preset. I warmed it up, and now I'm ready to move on. Again, we have another image, and I'm going to demonstrate now some of the brushes. Okay, so let's go to, let's select either extra soft or, yeah, I think I want to do extra soft. I think soft is going to be, soft works too, but it has a little bit too much contrast in it for me. So I'm going to go to extra soft, and what I'm going to do is go to exposure. I'm going to dial this up a little bit. We can go up quite a bit. I'm going to go up to say 0.5, and that is looking okay. Now we have our adjustment brushes over here. Now these brushes are designed for basically professional retouch. Well, as far as you can go inside of Lightroom, that is. For retouch, for enhancements, for anything like that. And everything is named very aptly. Right now, what I want to do is enhance some of the texture basically on our clothing. So I could do the clothing texture, but for right now, I'm just going to select general all purpose, and that's totally fine. I'm just going to click and drag it over the entire image. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on a Mac to erase, and I'm just going to erase it from our skin tones. Okay, and in just a couple moments we get this beautiful, vivid looking image where we have kind of perfect skin tones from that skin tone preset with this beautiful, vivid background. Let's look at the before and the after on that. And you saw how quick it was. But again, these presets can be used on a whole variety of things. So let's go over this newborn portrait right here. So here we have a newborn. This is a perfect example of a shot that you want to do, like an extra or a super soft on, okay? So what I'm going to do is just flip the white balance. I'm going to select this white right here. I'm going to adjust up a tiny bit because it's a little bit pink right there. And that skin desaturation from the super soft is going to do a great job with the pinks, and you're going to see that. So let's select super soft skin desaturate. And right away we have an image that's nearly done. I mean, all I'm going to do is just adjust my exposure, make it a little bit more warm, and it's perfect. We've removed those reds from the skin tones that we see so often in newborn portraiture. Okay, so here's the before, here's the after. A couple clicks and we're there. Let's go on to, let's check out this image. I want to do a little landscape stuff. So let's go to the vivids. And this, again, we took off the landscape because we don't have to have a landscape. This is really technically not a landscape, but we're going to apply the same settings we would to it. So what I'm going to do is click on Vivid Import, and we get this nice punched up look. I'm going to hit R to bring up my cropping tool, just kind of straighten it out a little bit, and then I'm just going to adjust my temperature a tiny bit down because it's a little bit on the warm side. This is starting to look solid right there. I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little titch, and that's great. Now we have this nice, vivid, high contrast look to our image. Let's try it on another detail. So here we have these awesome shoes. These are epic shoes, by the way. I shot these 2 weeks ago or something like that. And they're some of my favorite shoes that I've seen so far. So again, Vivid Import, and we're basically done. I mean, there's nothing else that we need to do that. If we want more contrast, we can do a light crush and get an even bigger pop out of it. But it looks great. 1 click and done. Let's go to another type. We have a studio shot right here of this father-son combo. And when this guy, this is one of our friends actually, he came in the studio. He used to be a reporter, big into sports. And he's like, I want a portrait that doesn't have the typical portrait feel. I want it to be punchy. I want it to be vibrant. I want it to be like not like a typical family photo type look. So we're like, cool, let's bring you in and do the shot. And then we applied basically an HDR effect to it, but it's the softer HDR look. Okay, so all we did was got this and we applied like say a medium HDR. we just pull down the exposure a bit, and then I'm going to click on his teeth just to get a nice little white balance. He has white, very white teeth, very nice. I'm just going to adjust it up to get a little bit of warmth back, and maybe a tiny bit more pinks. And that's it. We get this beautiful, vivid looking image with just that soft portrait HDR look. Okay, now of course we could do the standard soft portrait look with just skin desaturation and kind of make it extra soft, but this is exactly what he didn't want, was this kind of very soft look to the image. So we can go with tons of different looks and styles. Let's go try another image. We have this one, beautiful bride here getting ready. I'm gonna make a little crop adjustment just to kind of pull it in, bring our focus right to her. And now what we're going to do is let's start with an extra soft. And we can always gauge it. We can see, well, if extra soft is not soft enough, we can go to super soft. But I think extra soft works great in this. And you can see how much it kind of softens the image. And compare that to, say, vivid. This is why you don't use vivid on these types of shots, because something that's like this, it's going to get too crunchy. It's going to get too over the top. So unless that's your thing, I don't know. Everybody has their thing, but for us, our thing is that softer look. We want kind of that nice wedding look. I'm just going to brighten it up a tiny bit, and we're done with that single click. But if I want to, I can go ahead and create a virtual copy. I'm going to hit Control apostrophe or Command apostrophe on a Mac, and then I'm going to go to a stylized, and let's create like a nice, I'm going to go with a bright black and white on this one. So let's go with a bright fade black and white. I don't want filmic for this. I just want regular. So we have a nice high contrast, black and white faded look to this image. And if we do want film or we want some other effect, we can always apply that, but it looks great and it's one click away. Okay, if we want just a bright fade and we want to modify our curves, again, we can do that. We can modify and make our adjustments, and with a few clicks, we're done with our image. All right, let's go on to another one. Let's do this image right here. And this is another image that I'd probably use a vivid effect, because they're so far back that we really don't need to use a soft effect. I think I might even have it already applied. So here is the soft import, and it's going to look good, and it's still plenty sharp. We still have a lot of detail in the image. Again, we're not removing sharpening, but it doesn't have that kind of vivid punch to it that I want. So again, with a vivid import preset, we get additional punch, we get more vibrance and color, and it looks beautiful. It has a great effect, and if we want, we can always modify the curve. We can do whatever we want, whatever effect you guys are looking for. Now we're nearly done with our primer. There's one quick thing that I want to show you all. Let's go back and select a different image. I'm going to select our model image on our iPhone. I'm going to reset this out by hitting Control-Shift-R. And the one thing I want to show you is that we've named the base, all the base presets, to basically follow a similar structure as the curves. Okay, so actually, let's look at the stylized. So we have brights, we have neutrals, we have punchy, we have darks. Okay, these follow the same naming structure as our curves, because if we choose a bright fade with a skin desaturation, we can modify the curve to this without affecting anything else, without affecting overall exposure or anything like that. We can just modify color by choosing any of the bright washes. So whether we're using a neutral bright wash or a cool bright wash, we can get completely different colors on this image just by selecting a different one of these tones, or a different one of these presets. Now, if we select a neutral wash, it will affect overall exposure. It's not going to be a bad thing, but it is going to affect exposure, whereas selecting the same type of wash as described in the name, it's going to give you a consistent overall just color change. So for example, let's select, well, let's choose for this image, I'm going to try a punchy fade with filmic color. Now, for this image, I dig it. I like it where it's at, but it's a little bit too saturated. So all I'm going to do is just go down to my neutral curves, and under my punchy, so vintage punch, I'm just going to choose a skin desaturated version of that vintage punch, and we get a different, lighter, more subtle look to it. We can also choose a cross-process version, which I love. It looks awesome. And on top of this, once again, we can add our basically our special effects colors. So if we want to add another color to it, let's say we want to add some orange and blue, I can click that, get my orange and blues, and we have a completely new preset. And this is the point where I've created this new look that I want to keep, that I would go up here and save it to my Mixology. So let's do a quick recap. With the Because framework, we choose a base preset first that gets us close to, if not right at, the look that we're going for. We then can modify the curve by choosing a curve, and we know that if we choose a curve that follows the same name, so if we choose a bright wash with a bright preset, we're going to only modify the curve, and it's not going to change exposure or anything like that. So if you match the curve name, it's not going to affect exposure or anything. It's going to go right along with that preset. You can always mix and match and do whatever you like though. All right, from there we make an adjustment. After our adjustments are done, we can add in any special effects, any coloring, film grain, and so forth. When we're done, all we do is if we like our look, then we'd save that as a new Mixology. I'm gonna hit plus right now. We're gonna put this in my Mixology Pi, and I would save this, for example, I like, we always use descriptive names. So I'm gonna call this kind of, let's say yellow violet, because it kind of has those color tones in it. I'm gonna say high contrast filmic. Okay, that's the description I'm going to use. What we're going to do for our settings is you're going to click check all. What we like to do is deselect white balance and we deselect exposure. These are the two things that you always want to modify on an image-to-image basis. That way when you're flipping between presets, it's not constantly resetting them. You can quickly look at different presets without it resetting the white balance and exposure every single time. Okay, we're going to deselect everything on the lens corrections with the exception of lens vignetting. Everything else is already built in the preset. We don't need to modify anything. So all the other stuff based on whether we choose to import with profile corrections or based on whether we choose to import without profile corrections. That is these options here that we don't want to modify. Okay, the last thing we're going to deselect is camera calibration, so that way if you do have a special camera calibration, it's not going to change that with your presets. So take a screen capture of this. This is how you're going to save out your presets. These are exact settings that you're going to use. Hit create, and now we have our custom preset Mixology. There's one thing I forgot to do. I usually like to add a number to it so it goes in order. You guys can organize however you all like. Okay, so I'm going to delete this guy. Let's delete him now. Let's rename this to 01. Now I'm not going to keep this preset, so if you see a later tutorial, don't ask me where this preset is. But if I reset this by hitting Control-Shift-R or Command-Shift-R on a Mac and I click that, we get right back to that same look. And we just adjust contrast however, or adjust the exposure however we like. That's it for your basic primer on the preset system. You guys should be solid and good to go. Once you have created these awesome mixologies, be sure to hop onto the forums and share them. If we see your mixology and we like it, we'll feature your work on the main page at slrlounge.com. That's it for now. My name is Post Production Pi, and I'll see you all in the next video.